my oldest son, one of his best friends, broke his arms, and they had him all strung out on oxy, and he went over to stay the night one night, and his friend said, "You should try these. They're great. They just feel like amazing." And so he did. And one of the most addictive drugs there is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that was back before they, changed the packaging and pill type, and this when you could cut oxy, and each one of those pills was very expensive.
Yeah. $1 a milligram.
So it all goes from there, right? So that's when the stealing starts, the skipping school starts.
So he was just off to
Everything.
the races
It just
from
went.
beginning.
It just went.
I just want to thank you so much for
Yeah.
making this opportunity available on such short notice.
Yeah, worked out good. I'm glad you texted me.
Yeah, yeah.
Glad I was paying attention. Usually if I was watching, like half asleep watching a football game last night.
Yeah, apparently.
Probably why I didn't get the rest of the text. Like, oh, okay, cool, I can do that. Put it in my calendar.
Yeah.
So, all right, you ready?
Yeah, so if we want to just tell folks who you are.
Sure. So I'm Andrew Barkis. We are here in beautiful Lacey, Washington at my office, which is Hometown Property Management. Been in property management business for almost 30 years here in Thurston County, 25 years. We are a full service management company. That's my real job. My part-time job is I am a state representative serving the people of the 2nd Legislative District, which is Thurston and Pierce County. And I serve in the State House and have since 2016. So I'm going into my 8th year, which is hard to believe. I serve on the Housing Committee. I've done massive amount of policy around housing for the state of Washington. And I'm the ranking member on the Transportation Committee. So I'm the number 2 person in the House on the budget and policy when it comes to transportation for the state of Washington. So that keeps me incredibly busy.
Yeah.
And then I do a lot of other policy. So as you know, I've worked within covered services and housing and addiction and homelessness and, all the things that kind of intertwine and where they all meet. Because eventually it all meets in Olympia under the dome, as I like to say, in the Capitol, where policy is made. And hopefully problems are solved, but not necessarily. Sometimes problems are exacerbated by that building. So, but yeah, it's great to see you. Great to be able to talk a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. It is really great to see you. And just so folks that are watching know, we met through a mutual friend, which is Eric Johnson with Como News 4, and we both had the opportunity to participate in a couple of different his documentary series, and it's been an absolute pleasure having the opportunity to connect with you a few different times. Yeah. So being a Washington state representative, I mean, what does that actually mean? What is a Washington? What is a state representative?
Sure. Well, it's an elected position.
Okay.
It's a huge honor for one. So of course we have a representative government in this country, and we have in Washington State the legislature, which would be the Congress, and on the federal level. So we have a House of Representatives, we have a Senate. That's the legislative branch. Of course, then we have the executive branch, which is the governor and all the agencies that follow that, and then the Supreme Court for the judicial. So it's a similar model. So the being a state representative is a position that anybody can run for, and it is exactly that. It's representative. So our founding fathers, years ago, came up with this amazing system based on, how can you best represent the people of the state? And not everybody can go to Olympia, right? So I'm elected to represent now 170,000 people in our district. So there's 49 districts throughout the state of Washington, broken out by population. And every 2 years, I stand for election if I choose to. And I represent the people of the 2nd District in Washington State. So it is a duty. We are the lawmakers. We're the ones who develop legislation and policy on all the big issues. in the different roles. Like I said, the ranking member on transportation. So I write, I'm one of the people who writes the transportation budget, which is a $8 billion, $10 billion budget to keep our state's transportation system working. So it's fascinating. And to me, everybody asks, well, why would you do that? How did you find a way, whatever.
Yeah. What compelled you to, well, first of all, what experience did you have that, sort of piqued your interest in becoming a Washington State representative, and that, and then what has compelled you to stay in that position for as long as you have?
Sure. Well, for me, it was the next indicated step, right?
Okay.
It was service. I got involved. I'll go way back.
Okay.
I can remember my dad taking me to the Capitol on a Sunday walk, and walking through the Capitol and just kind of being mystified by this amazing place and learning more about it. And then eventually at one point when I was very young in school and Boy Scouts and learning about, citizenship and the nation and community and all the different things and leadership, I was like, I could do that. I want to be there. And that was planted, that seed, years ago. So then you flash forward through life. I ended up back here in 96, start with this little company. Great gentleman came in one day to my office and said, hey, would you like to have breakfast with me at the Lions Club, the Lacey Sunrise Lions? And I went, yeah, okay, what's that? My dad was a Lion. And, it's service. So I became a Lion, and then I got involved with the Chamber, and then I got involved with Rotary, and all these different offshoots about being a servant leader, being in service in the community. And people would come up to me all the time and say, hey, when are you going to run for office?
Yeah.
We need you. We need you to do this. Oh, and I'd be like, oh, maybe someday. And back in 2010, 2011, I decided to take that leap.
Okay.
And I ran for county commissioner here in Thurston County, lost my first election.
Okay.
And then in 2013 was up for the appointment to the House. Again, through the same process. You start to know people and how the political parties move and all the different things. But I still had this commitment to service. I lost that appointment too. And then I'm kind of thinking, well, maybe it wasn't meant to be. So I just keep doing what I'm doing in the community. And then it was meant to be in 2016. I went through the appointment process again, and this time did get the appointment and then stood for my first election in 2016 and won.
Okay.
So to me, it is all about, and for every person it's different, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's not a job. I have a great career in my company and everything else. It is truly about trying to make a difference. It's truly about bringing my life experience, my work experience into policy making along with my colleagues, whoever wants to work on things. And so we'll talk more about different things, but I have always said I would do this as long as I felt that that people want to keep me there, because I have to stand for election.
Which obviously they do.
They do. And B, as long as I still feel I have work to do. And I, at this point in time, for a little bit longer, I still have work to do.
Yeah.
For the people. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of work that still needs
a lot
to
of
be done.
work. Yeah.
And so thank you so much.
It takes
for
a lot
your
out.
service.
I mean, it's like it's there are times where it's just like, man.
Yeah.
Because the more for someone like myself, I immerse. So I want to problem solve, and I'm willing to work with anybody. I don't care what affiliation, what background. I don't care. I just want to do the work that's going to get things done and accomplish things. And that takes a lot more, because then you're vested and you're into it, and then you're accessible, and it's full time. You're just doing this all the time. So,
as a legislator, so you're responsible for your constituents, essentially, right? So 170,000 people. And so what kind of topic areas do you have to address as a Washington State representative across the board to try to be a good steward, or, shepherd of, your constituents?
A lot.
Yeah.
So, the conversations that I have, and, we were chatting a little bit before this, and my office is inundated constantly with emails, and we'll get form emails and whatever the topics, whether it's, it could be policy around guns, it could be policy around housing, or a budget issue, or a request of some sort. You get a lot of that. But we also get a lot of individual people, constituents, a mother who's having problems with her teenage son, person who is facing a challenge in their business, as somebody who just had a conversation who is trying to navigate through the foster, we have a very broken system right now, and they are foster parents trying to do the right thing. And I mean, just, it's interesting. But those I do in my office, I know that most of my colleagues, those get elevated. So if you're a constituent and I get a direct email or phone call, those get elevated, and we'll do everything we can to help, whether it's within policy or helping guide you to the right services, or sometimes just to listen. But a lot of times change happens through that, because that's where that's where policy comes from. Because somebody will call and say, this is broken, and we'll look and we'll say, well, how do we fix that?
Yeah.
And then we go in and we dig around and we go, oh, well, it's in this piece of the law, but if we add this, and that starts the process, right? And I've done that a lot in different things.
So you're essentially responsible for every aspect of life that comes across your desk as the shepherd of your constituents.
I've never looked at it that way. But it is
put in a position to, be the support pinnacle, essentially.
Yeah. And
for the folks in your district.
Of course, there's a political balance to it.
Right.
People agree with me. People disagree with me. Some people didn't vote for me in the district,
Right.
But there is that true representation. So yes,
So the folks that didn't vote for you, though, still call you when they have an issue that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And they're just as...
And I think that's really important to point out, because they are in your district.
Same priority. Yeah. Same priority. I mean, there's several people I know, and I know there we're different in our political background or whatever, but, I seek the common, not the difference. I seek, whatever the situation is. And if I can't do anything about it, I'm going to let you know that I can't, or I'm going to find somebody that can. But, we're, I don't know if the word is responsible, but we're again, representative. So, we're taking, if there's a community in my district, say Ording or Eatonville or something, and they have a community concern and everything else, and they bring that to me, then yes, I am the one, along with my seatmate, there's 2 representatives and 1 senator, the 3 of us for the district. We're responsible to advocate or to bring that forth if it has to do with the state, if it has to do in that arena. And then, of course, if we take it from there and it goes federal, then we go to our federal contingency, a representation, So, Congresswoman Schreier or Strickland or whoever, or Senator Murray or Cantwell, you escalate that up. But it's very intricate, as far as how that goes. So I go into districts. So we're in interim right now. So we have session in January, and it's either a long session, 105 days, which we just had. This one coming up in January will be short, 60-day session. And then when you're out of session, you're in interim, so you're out of the district. Mm-hmm. So, I'm out in Eatonville and Ording. I was just in Ording a couple of days ago, meeting with the school district to talk about their needs, right? Yeah. And you're constantly talking to people and putting this all together. And it all comes and boils down into policy, right?
Can I ask you a question really quick, and not to interrupt, but how often does your political identity impact your willingness to support your constituents, regardless? Does that question make sense?
Yes, it does.
The reason I ask is because I believe you to focus and support individuals on a human level as opposed to a political level. And that's why I ask. I think there's a massive amount of separation in our communities just because of these identities. And as a lawmaker, as a representative of a large portion of the population here in Western Washington, how often do you let your political identity have an impact on your connection to humanity?
I don't, for me.
Yeah.
Some do.
Yeah.
But I would say more on, and this sounds partisan, but I've seen it more out of the majority. So I'm a Republican, I'm in the minority in Washington State. But I don't self-identify as a Republican. I am a representative, as you said.
Yeah.
I'm Andrew Barkis, first and foremost, right?
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of putting that forth. Now, just the opposite, unfortunately, in today's society, people will use that in reverse against me,
Right.
right? We're not going to talk to you because you're a Republican. We're not going to listen to this idea because you're a Republican, or you might be this way or whatever else. And I always try to dismiss. I was like, you're missing out. You should talk to me, because let's just put that aside. And and I demonstrated it. And this last session, working with my colleagues on housing, working with my colleagues on traffic safety issues. Great Democrat friend. We're great friends now, and we couldn't be more different in our ideology. It doesn't matter. But I remember her saying to me, she's like, you're amazing, and you're willing to do all this stuff. And she said, it's kind of funny. I was talking to a few people and they said, oh, I wouldn't even talk to him because he probably won't be willing to do that. And I'm like, see, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Everybody should talk, at least have
then
the
you find out
conversation.
what somebody's willing to do.
Yeah, and there are those that I've gone to and they said, no, we really don't want to work with you, or can't work with you because of whatever reason. I mean, whatever. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But again, I seek out the commonality. I seek the collaboration. I seek to doing that. Now, there are going to be times that that's just very difficult to do because it is a very principled argument, or it is a piece of legislation that is very polarizing. And we have plenty of those, right?
Yeah.
But on the whole, try to do the best I can within the confines of being in the minority to bring forth as many good ideas and representations as I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sorry to take you off track with that, but as I was listening, I just really wanted to highlight that, because I think that a lot of that stuff is overlooked because of labels. And I think that, and I know the passion that you have for helping to improve communities, and so which is the whole thing with me as well. I mean, everything it is that I do is so that we can strengthen our communities, so that the individuals that make up our constituencies or our communities, that those folks have the tools that they need so that they can thrive. And I believe that you are on the same page with that. So,
well, the key word there is community.
Right.
And see, we've lost that. And
I agree with you.
I believe that at the core of the problems and the dividing and all the different things is because we've made community a bad thing. We've politicized it. We've labeled it. We've separated it. We've divided all these different, as opposed to coming together. And I mean, when I grew up, in a small town and stuff, it was all about community. And and your community was based around basically church, your schools, and the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right. Really, if you think about it. I mean, I remember going with my dad to the grocery store, and he knew everybody.
Yeah.
And everybody talked, and everybody and so we've isolated this stuff out, and it's in no more evident than going through COVID, right? I mean, if you want to see where things really took a turn for the worse, was COVID. And now we're having to try to come out of that, right? And I saw that firsthand in the policy that came out of the legislative sessions during COVID that have led to where we're at today. And they're not good. They're not good.
Well, let's talk about that. I'd really like to, and I try to get, especially when it comes to our lawmakers and our other shepherds, law enforcement, our court systems. When I talk to folks that have been in positions, of authority, essentially, in our communities, I try to really highlight where the shift has been made. And so you've been in office for a number of years. And so I would imagine that you've seen some serious changes, and that you have been sort of at the helm of, where those changes have originated, and the fighting that's probably occurred trying to create rational change in our community. So let's talk about that. Yeah. So we had COVID. So did you notice any change sort of happening before COVID?
Yeah. It had begun, a lot in the space that I work in, because I'm in property management. So a lot of landlord tenant law changes, and you could see this agenda, right? This shift away of accountability and responsibility, and a lot of blame, a lot of, different, you could just kind of feel it.
Yeah.
And it started to manifest in policy. And so we were fighting against that, the stakeholder groups. And so I came in, and I think it was 2018. I said, look, we need to be proactive. Let's come up with better ideas and let's put forth bills that are better. And so we did, and we countered, and they couldn't believe that we were actually putting forth different ideas in policy. We passed, I think, 2 or 4 or 3 out of the 5 or something. It was pretty amazing. But you could feel that shift. We could definitely see it in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
It had already started. Police.
Yeah. Talk about that. A little bit of the details. What started
police,
happening there?
Police accountability, which is very good, right? There have been some situations. Some of it came through the work with the tribal communities in Washington State, the initiative that came about, and I think that was 2018 or thereabouts, that, we really need to look at law enforcement and make sure that the bad actors are not there and the good ones are, and we support them, and we work through this together as a community. So there were some good bases. There were some good foundations being laid, but there was also an underlying narrative. This was kind of the beginning of the DEI, the diversity, equity, inclusion movement. And then all that kind of came crashing into a continual, what I call decriminalization.
Yeah.
So you could see policy coming through public safety and everything else that was counterintuitive. If you ran a bill that said we should increase the penalty for this particular crime, it was not even considered.
Regardless
if you
of
brought
what
in a
the
bill and
nature
said
of
we
it
should
was.
decrease that, you're going to get a hearing.
Yeah.
And so
And do you, in your perspective, what sort of spurred that, move away from accountability?
I believe that it was.
If you're at liberty to
Well,
discuss that.
I think it's a combination. I think it's ideologically driven. I think that it is. There are those who feel that. Gosh, the word that comes into my mind is utopia, but it's really socialism or Marxism. There's all sorts of different isms, right, that kind of come into the policy of why we do this. But a lot of reason is, there had been a history of disproportionate, right, when it comes to the African American community or other communities that had fallen into certain things. Maybe it was around drugs, right? Marijuana was a big one, right?
Yeah.
How many people were prosecuted for marijuana? But, I think that everything started to be looked at through that lens. And so instead of what we should do is come to the middle and kind of find this middle ground, we go to extremes.
Right.
So we say, we've had this, now we need to do away with all that and go here.
So it went from doing too much to doing nothing.
Yeah. So in this process, and it was fascinating to me because I hadn't seen it firsthand until I started to see the policy, right?
Yeah.
The bills. And it was really telling that there was a fundamental shift.
Yeah.
Now, during this time, I was going through some stuff that, over here with family and other things, right? And so I was starting to I was already interacting within the system.
Yeah.
And trying to see how it would work, right?
Yeah.
And then from my own lived experience, seeing areas that were broken, going, wow, we need to fix this, this, and this. Yeah. But over here, we're not fixing it. We're doing away with it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, wait a minute, you need this. So you see this happen. Fast forward into COVID.
Yeah.
We're all isolated. We're doing legislative session via Zoom, not in person.
And just a segue, and we won't forget where we're at, but how do you think not being in person actually affects? For me personally, having a human interaction gives me a different sort of ability to connect on an emotional level with other human beings.
Everything we do in the legislature, history will show up, books will be written about that. Those were the most devastating years of anybody on all these different levels. Yeah.
I know it's affected our youth tremendously.
It's affected me. It's affected, it's affected everybody in some way. You can't do the people's business without the people.
Right.
And when you close the building and when you can't talk to constituents and you can't talk to those who represent the different stakeholders, you can't talk to your colleagues.
Yeah.
Because I may be sitting on, we're debating a bill and I hear you and I'll get up and I'll walk across the aisle, kneel down next to your desk and go, what was that?
Yeah.
Good or bad, right?
Right.
Where are you at on this?
Yeah.
because we weren't there, you had this force, you had this push to do policy, and it was all around defund the police, right?
Yeah.
So George Floyd, all the movement, Seattle, the CHOP, all that stuff manifested itself into policy. We're going to do away with pursuit. We're going to do away with this.
Right.
We're going to do away with lethal.
How
All that
absent
stuff.
were your constituents' voice during these sessions over COVID after
weren't
George
there.
Floyd? They weren't even present. So it was just representatives
They
sort
were
of winging it.
there via email. They were there via the way we get stuff.
Yeah.
But it's different for me to get 1,000 emails.
Yeah.
It's more impactful to see 3 people walk through the door.
Right.
Right. And hear their voices in the committee hearing room. And when you're having committees online and you're trying to scroll through to see who's here, and I just have to focus on whoever's testifying, but I can't see my colleagues. I can't see what your reaction is. Are you paying attention?
Right.
Are you just online doing something else? You're not even there, right? It was tremendously impactful. And so as a result, all that stuff passed, right? And 21 was a hybrid session. We were kind of there, kind of not, still locked out, total garbage.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they were realizing, maybe some of these bills went too far.
Yeah.
Maybe the Blake, remember that one? All
Yeah.
that stuff, right?
Well, we're still affected by Blake. This idea
all
of
that-
gross misdemeanor being a resolution is baffling.
So all that policy, then they came back and went, well, we went a little too far. We
So
need to allow
representatives actually acknowledging this
They are
behind
but
the scenes?
Yes, because of constituency pressure.
Right.
Because you can't ignore what's happening, Ginny, out in the streets.
Yeah.
Or at the local Safeway or whatever. Everybody feels exactly the same. The pressure, the decline in public safety, the lawlessness, everything else.
Well, and the fact that we're literally supporting the destruction of human life.
So the laws that were put into place contributed to the problems.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. So,
Absolutely.
So
Well,
when
and
we came back, I just to
Yeah, no.
conclude it. So
Go ahead. We could talk forever, but go
when
ahead.
we came back, though, there was some acknowledgement, and there was some
From both
compromise
sides.
from both sides that we need to fix, like the pursuit bill, right?
Yeah.
But there is still a huge contingency in the majority that does not want to change course, that does not want to go back, that wants to keep going forward.
Yeah.
That's why the Blake fix. That's why we went back to special session. We couldn't fix it in the time we had in session.
Yeah.
It blew up on the floor the last day. It's amazing, historic. You should watch the video of it.
I would love to.
And then,
if you have a link, send it to
and
me.
then we had to come back, weeks later after a compromise. And, there was some good in that, but it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And we never did fix the pursuit bill. So you still have situations like with retail theft and all other things are going, you can't pursue. We have limited our law enforcement.
Yeah.
Then, as a byproduct, we're losing our law enforcement.
Oh, absolutely.
So our numbers,
They have no
lowest
autonomy to
and
actually
lowest
do their
and
job.
Lowest and lowest. And I talk to police officers and they're like, look, I've got 20 years in. Do you think I'm going to blow, to stand the risk of doing? We have compromised the ability for the men and women who protect us to do what their job is.
Yeah.
And that's just on that part. That's not even talking to criminal justice prosecutors.
We're risking their safety, their freedom, and everything else, but wanting them to do a variation of the job.
So we've created this. And
absolutely.
And
thank you for saying that.
A lot of that happens in Olympia under the dome. And it's policy and law.
Yeah.
And then, because you'll hear sheriffs and law enforcement say, well, we would love to be able to do it, but we can't. The law changed, so we can't do that anymore.
Right.
We have to do this over here instead. Some of the stuff comes with great intent, right? Some of it comes with great ideas and intent of maybe a different way.
Yeah, I don't think people are malicious.
No.
I think often they're uninformed. They just don't know, or they think they know. And this is where I started seeing a lot of these narratives take place, was on the UW campus when I was a student and as an older lady just a few years back. And I was like, wait a minute. You guys don't know anything what it's like to come from where I'm from. And so, these things that you're pushing are actually problematic for the population that you're trying to serve.
The other thing is you have to have the ability to admit when you're wrong.
And I think there's a lot of that that's missing.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Because, if you make a mistake, you can say, okay, here's what our intent was. didn't quite work out, but maybe we should bolster up retail theft and allow for this, this, and this, because maybe it's not a victimless crime. Maybe there are victims everywhere. And maybe because we're allowing this to happen, we're feeding the drug addiction because we're allowing them to get resources to buy their drugs or trade.
Right.
It's not victimless. Everybody's a victim when it comes to how that is. So why don't we admit that? Why don't we just say, well, we made a mistake. Let's fix that.
Yeah.
And guess what? Drugs don't discriminate based on color, sex, age, religion. They don't give a shit.
And drug addiction, and people don't like it when I say this, but I was a drug addict for 30 years. Drug addiction also is not a victimless crime. Yeah. We're only looking at the individual that is using the drugs as though they are not perpetuating any kind of, victimhood onto others, which just isn't the case. And I'm certain that you, like you said, you have a number of interactions with folks in the foster system, and those kids don't come from nowhere.
There's a better way.
There is.
There's a better way, and it takes all of it.
It does.
You have to have a robust criminal justice system.
Yes, absolutely.
And you have to have a robust, prosecutorial, a position on things.
Yes.
And you have to allow law enforcement. And then you can create all sorts of other ways of interfacing within that.
Yes.
And we don't have to use the old model of 10 years ago in the criminal justice system where, I've never once said, let's take that person who's an addict and throw them in jail and toss the key over here and let them rot for 10 years.
Right.
That doesn't solve the problem. As a matter of fact, it makes the problem worse because you have that whole thing going on in jail.
Right.
Why don't we use the tools that we have and recreate or reimagine a better way, pathways to get people the help while still holding them accountable? Right. While still saying it's not okay. Stealing is not okay.
Right.
Living on a freeway right-of-way is illegal. It's trespassing. It's not okay.
Yeah.
Right? It's not okay to do the things that we're seeing happen every day. There are laws on the books today.
Yeah.
Right? Still, we're just not enforcing them.
Right.
So I think we have to start there. Accountability, enforcement, all the different things. Give the resources we need to do. Keep our parks, our schools, everything as safe as possible, and use this and make sure that all the things we've learned from the past, mistakes, are not recreated. Right. Discrimination or anything that has to do with race or anything that has to do with any of the things that were in the past. Let's not make that a focal point. Let's make it an individual focal point to, yes, if you've done something really, really bad, you should be held accountable and do the time for doing that. But if you've entered into this system through whatever it is, whatever pathway took you here, and you're stealing to support a habit and everything else, and they want help, then let's get them the help.
Yeah, let's create a system. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Yeah.
And let's redevelop the system to help an individual gain the skills and abilities to care for themselves and to stop victimizing society, right? Let's address the underlying causes. That's my argument as well. Well, let me ask you this. What are some of the biggest ticket items that your constituents are calling about today? Because I feel like it's definitely changed from 8 years ago.
Public safety.
Public safety.
Absolutely, public safety.
Yeah.
I don't care where you're at. You used to say, well, I live out in such and it won't affect me out here. Or I live in the country, or I live out in the county. It's everywhere.
And when you say it and public safety, what do you mean?
Theft, crime, drug usage, violent crime, youth crime.
Yeah.
On the highest rate ever that we've seen. All of this is happening and it's self-perpetuating, right? It's just like it's getting worse and it's spreading, right? So you used to be able to concentrate. Remember, you used to be able to say, "Oh, well, that's a bad part of town, right?
Yes.
That's a bad area. You don't want to go." Well, it pretty much all downtown
everywhere.
Seattle is a bad area, right?
Oh yeah.
And
the entire city is dangerous.
The entire city,
now.
right? And so
that's why I moved away from there.
But Tacoma, Olympia, Tenino.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter size, area, it's everywhere because criminals are smart. They figure stuff out. They know what they can get away with. And it starts to go out further and further.
Yeah.
They know that in Thurston County that our sheriff is understaffed. They know that they don't have enough deputies on the road. They know that if I have a break-in at my house, nobody's going to respond.
Nobody's coming.
Nobody's going to respond. They also know that if they get caught, there's no consequences, right?
And the sad part also that I think that the mainstream society doesn't understand is that those that are suffering and cannot break themselves away from perpetuating these problems in their own life, because committing crimes and doing drugs, that's a problem, is that nobody's coming to save them. Yeah. Where I personally was able to count on that, I was, and thank God.
Yeah.
Thank God that in 2012 that it was illegal, because I knew that there was a high probability that I was going to be removed from that destructive path.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of people who have expressed the same thing.
Yeah.
So public safety, of course, the cost of living, of course, expense, a lot of concerns with our schools, both in the education, the curriculum, but also in safety too. And, down to, gridlock on the freeways. I mean, it's right. We get inundated, but I think the biggest things that we're hearing, our constituents that I'm hearing, is what are you going to do about public safety, and and how come it's so expensive? Why is gas so expensive? Why is because it's
Do you think people realize that they're voting for this stuff?
Sometimes, but here
it's hard to educate. It's hard to educate society on what we're voting.
Hours, but I think everybody should pay attention and everybody should vote, and you really should think about
I agree
who you're voting for.
Know what you're voting for.
Because we just saw races in Seattle, and when you think about the size and breadth of how many people live in Seattle, and how it's just disgusting that only 18-20% of people voted, and who's voting is determining the outcome so you get what you vote for.
I think people feel like their vote doesn't matter.
Well, their vote does.
It does.
Everybody I talked to, I'm like, look, I ran the political arm for our party for a long time and campaigns, and we won campaigns by 100, 200 votes. We lost campaigns by 200. Every vote counts. Every vote counts. I mean, look at this Thurston County Commission race. I mean, it was 300 votes separated to winners and losers, right? So it's very important about that. But the people are. I think it's getting to that point where you used to be able to say it doesn't affect me.
Right.
That's on the TV. That's happening over there. It doesn't affect me. But I'm talking to people who literally just went to Safeway, and there's somebody stealing something, and they're witnessing what's going on, or they're seeing somebody overdose in a parking lot, or they're wondering why the guy's laying on the sidewalk, on the way to walk to school. And it's not somebody else's problem. It's everybody's problem. Right. And so I really believe that people are starting to see this, and they're starting to go, look, what's going on? And what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And so we're coming into election season. We're coming into another session. It'll be interesting to see if bills, I know we're going to bring up policy to allow for, the continued pursuit. I know we're going to try to do more stuff. I know there's a lot of really great ideas about dealing with our drug-addicted mental health problem that we have in Washington State.
Yeah.
And it's not just throw another $100 million at it.
Yeah.
There's
Does that bill keep increasing every year?
Oh my gosh, it's incredibly how much money we spent.
Yeah, and how much of the money that you are spending is actually going toward helping people to overcome their circumstances, just on that topic?
I don't know the actual number, but I would imagine it's a pretty low percent.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
I think that there is a lot of it self-perpetuating. I think we create industry within an industry.
Absolutely.
A lot of this, we've had this discussion about, what I call the...
Did I ever tell you about when back after 9/11, when George Bush supported the additional unemployment funds, right? And then they pulled together the whole worker retraining thing. Do you remember that back in 2001? Okay, so I sat in at a community college information session, and there was a tremendous amount of encouragement for folks to go into counseling, drug and alcohol, the social service sector, because of the exponential growth that would be experienced by 2020. And I've always found that to be really fascinating. I've never forgotten that because of where we are right now. But anyways, I'm sorry, that just made me think of that.
Yeah,
but
well, when I see an article the other day, it said city leaders request an additional $100 million to fix the problem they created.
right.
The drug problem they created.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it goes back to that admitting we were wrong, admitting we made a mistake. I mean, there's no way to sugarcoat it. You can't walk around Seattle and go, oops, maybe it was a bad policy decision to allow for open air using of heroin and fentanyl on the street. Maybe it was a bad idea to not criminalize these type of hard drugs. Maybe it was, let's fix this.
Yeah, because we're not small countries. Like, we're not the size, of Montana, like some of the European countries that were trying to model their process. We are the United States is a very different place. In 2015, when I worked for social services downtown Seattle, Pete Holmes, the city attorney at that time, was, passing some ordinances that, prohibited police from really being able to do their jobs then before anything went into effect here in Olympia. And the police had stopped arresting because it was essentially, because I had talked to some of the street beat cops, because I'm like, why aren't any of these people being arrested? Even though I was serving this population, I understand the benefit of separation. And so, they said, well, the city attorney, he's not processing any of the cases that we're putting across the desk. So it's essentially a waste of our time and energy.
Yeah. It was amazing when some of those statistics came out on, repeat offenders, when you would see that one case for that gentleman who ended up killing his girlfriend, stabbing her to death in Cal Henderson Park.
Oh, yeah.
46 times he'd been arrested or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, at what point, right?
Didn't that happen like during the Chaz thing?
Right in that same.
Yeah. When the park was essentially, because I rode my bicycle up there. I was still living in Seattle at the time. I do recall that. And a number of other things. Tremendous amount of sexual assaults happening during that time.
Yeah. You look at all that, and I think that, kind of getting back just to full circle, I truly believe that people want balance, and they want that fixed. They want that fixed. And it's going to take a lot. I mean, my little piece that I work on in the legislature, in the transportation arena, the Washington State transportation budget is the State Patrol is underneath that, right? So we appropriate the money to run the State Patrol. State Patrol is responsible for a lot of things, mainly.
I actually always wonder about that.
Keeping our, keeping our highways safe. And we're down 240 troopers. Right?
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, we have seen a massive decline in both in, just through natural attrition and everything else. But then on the backside, we're seeing a very slow rebuild. So you've got this imbalance, right?
Yeah.
How do we keep the highway safe?
Yeah.
So you'll have one part say, well, gosh, it's this, we need to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, but have you driven down I-5 at any time? I mean, people are going 85 miles an hour.
Yeah.
People are doing it. It's crazy out there. It really, why? Why is that? Because there's no troopers on the road.
Yeah.
There's very limited troopers on the road. I mean, I slow down when I see a trooper on the side of the
I
road.
slow down when I see one too. I was just going to say, I'm like, definitely in the...
I know. I drive a little fast.
Yeah.
So,
hey, I pay my tickets.
But, yeah. So there has to be, I think that people want that back. And...
well, it does. It's kind of like raising kids, right? If you know what the rules are and your parents are home, you're more likely to act within the parameters of those rules, right? And it keeps the household a little bit safer.
Yeah. And I think that, when it comes to coming up with a solution, people are always asking, well, how are you going to fix it's a daunting task.
Yeah.
To fix the drug problem we have right now. But there is proven pathways to do that.
Yes.
There are other states in this country that have gone a long way to fix the problem. There are a lot of other ideas and communities that have been put forth. We need to, and we've talked about, the meeting people where they stand and each individual, and using resources in the state and creating facilities that are kind of a one-stop shop that actually have. I'm not talking about buying a hotel and throwing people in a hotel
and making sure that they stay high.
Look, we cleaned up the right of way, and
now you don't have to see it anymore.
Yeah, they're over there, and it's just that whole problem is migrated into another. We just condensed it down into one area with better facilities, right?
Right.
And so,
well, and that's part of the fallacy too. I have a few friends who have like, oh, well, Seattle looks a lot better. I'm like, they're shoving people behind closed doors, and now they're just maiming each other within those environments.
Well, I mean, come on. Look at San Francisco a couple weeks ago. What a joke, right?
Yeah.
The president of China comes.
Oh, yeah.
So overnight, the whole city turns into a sparkling.
Yeah.
It turns into the San Francisco I remember going to years and years ago. Loved going to San Francisco. Beautiful town, great culture, great art, great food. Last time I was there,
it's a nightmare.
A couple years ago, when I was taking my son to college down in California, and we drove, and I said, "We're gonna go to San. I want you to see San Francisco, Fisherman's Wharf."
Yeah.
It was
terrifying.
It was horrific.
Yeah.
It was absolutely horrific.
The CEO I saw, because I was looking at a bunch of stuff on the summit. There was one statement that was made at that summit, the APEC summit, that had come across, and there was a request by our current administration to slow the importing of fentanyl. And for, that which really angered me, because I would be demanding the cease of importation of fentanyl into our country. However, that's not the point of this. The point of this is that the CEO of, oh my gosh, what's the name of it? There's a big software company, anyways, the CEO, he had gotten on, I forget his name, but he says, oh, I'm so proud of San Francisco and everything they're doing. And I don't know how any one of us in this country could let that statement at all come out about the city of San Francisco. Like, it is an epic failure. We are failing every San Franciscan, including the people that make up, those living on the streets. We're failing them as well. Yeah. And so it's some kind of odd social experiment where we are saying that allowing the destruction of human life is some sort of success. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it's a weird juxtaposed thing, because a lot of times in my political with my affiliation, it's usually saying that we're not compassionate. We don't want, and I'm thinking, well, how is that compassion?
Yeah.
To allow somebody to live underneath a bridge or a tent, or to be
so
smart. I mean, it's just
living in feces. That's not compassion.
It's just unbelievable. And, we're looking at that and we're seeing what's perpetuating that. And it's not hard to see.
It's not.
I mean, you can do that. You can back it up into that statement of saying, "Oh, we're gonna cut back on this." Same thing, yeah. No, you're gonna stop. I mean, we're never gonna stop it, right?
Yeah. But we're not going to support it as an administration.
There are things that we can do as an administration. Our borders, people coming across our borders. You're looking at that going, oh, but they're just people. They need, whatever, they're seeking America. I get it.
Yeah.
So
our
country's built on that.
There's a process. Right? There's a process
for
everything.
But there's also really, really, really bad people bringing really bad stuff in our country, and it's proven. Yeah. They just had a bust a couple of months ago in Centralia where some alert guy pulls over a car with something. Turns out the thing is packed full of fentanyl.
Oh my gosh.
And it's a Mexican cartel. It's a cartel.
I've had so many friends die over and over and over again. It's actually made me question the validity of the numbers that have been reported, because I'm telling you, and I was born and raised in a drug life. I'm 51 years old. My entire life, I've never had as many friends die as I have just since January, including my 22-year-old niece from a synthetic opioid. And I'm flabbergasted, I'm disgusted, and I'm angry. Yeah. I'm angry about it, especially when we take a wishy-washy approach to, hey, I would like to request a reduction in.
Everybody should be angry.
Everybody should be angry.
I mean, what I should see on the Capitol steps is not, a continued argument that I want to take away a woman's right,
Yeah.
which I don't.
Right.
Your constitutional protected right, which I uphold the Constitution.
Right.
Right. Why aren't you on the steps screaming for that reason? Because another youth has died. Because another child's life has been cut short.
Why don't they matter?
Why doesn't that? I mean, it's.
Why are we more focused on sending money to countries while ours is going down the drain?
I talked to the coroner here. I mean, we were through this other people we were talking about the different, and it was brought to the attention that they need to hire more staff. They don't have enough people to deal with all the stuff they're seeing because of drugs and suicides and all the things because it's all together.
It is. It's all intertwined.
And so the concerns there. I love the word wishy-washy. Why are we taking this? Why aren't we taking a hard stand?
Yeah.
And I think that, I know
why don't Americans matter?
I know that people are getting to that point, and I know that no matter what, because it's affecting, and so we have to find a way to channel that in the right way.
Yes.
To hear all voices, but I think that the unified voice is enough is enough. This has got to stop.
Yeah. Do you think we're there yet?
I think we're getting damn close.
You think it's going to get worse before it gets better?
Seems to always.
Yeah. Where does your experience with the addiction piece come from?
Well, actually thinking about it goes way back, into the past times with my family members, brothers, methamphetamines back in the 90s, were a big deal. And
that's when they call it crank.
Crank, yeah. And I thank God somehow was too busy to ever try or experiment. But it hit my brothers really hard. So I watched them in and out of treatment and everything else. And fortunately, they did get clean for periods of time, although I'll circle back to that. My oldest son, a couple merit badges from an Eagle Scout, all-star baseball player and everything else. And 7th, 8th, we started seeing some patterns, some changes in behavior, and some of the things that you start to worry about. Maybe he's experimenting in cigarettes or whatever, marijuana, But all that kind of culminated when one of his best friends broke his arms, and they had him all strung out on Oxy, and he went over to stay the night one night, and his friend said, "You should try these, they're great. They just feel like amazing." And so he did. And one of the most addictive drugs there is, right?
Yeah.
And that was back before they, changed the packaging and pill type, and this when you could cut Oxy, and each one of those pills was very expensive.
Yeah, $1 a milligram.
So it all goes from there, right? So that's when the stealing starts, the skipping school starts.
So he was just off to the races from beginning.
It just went. Went.
Wow.
And so by the time he was a freshman in high school, it was really bad. And we were dealing with, as average parents who so many have told me their stories since then, what do you do? How do you navigate this? How do you get help? Counseling, whatever. Well, he finally ended up in the courts, the juvenile courts, back when we actually had juvenile courts that actually did stuff, and the Becca law, and he did some, time at the juvenile facility. And
how relieved as a parent were you when he was removed?
That was the first respite we had in years.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself as a parent wishing that he would be locked up?
Yeah, I will say, yeah. There are moments as a parent where you don't know where he's at, you don't know what's going to happen, you fear the phone call.
Yeah.
You live a lie, still the phone rings in the middle of the night. All the different things you go through, right? And I just wanted something to help us help him, and I couldn't find that. I couldn't find it. So when he did end up there, it was like one of the first times that his mother and I had a moment. And by this time now he has a younger brother. So that just started it, because once you get into that, it's really hard. And you break probation and back. And so the revolving door, right? Mm-hmm. And we finally ended up in a situation where where big crimes have been committed and things have happened, and we were given an alternative, and it's like, you got to either he's going here or you got to find a better alternative. And thank God, literally, we found a program in Nevada, and we had the resources to to send him there.
How long was that program?
It was a year.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
he was gone for 10 months. We didn't quite make it through the year. The program was Teen Challenge
Okay, yeah.
and very well known, but this particular one in Nevada, they had a lot of issues in staffing. And so it was a good and bad experience, but he came back and did well for periods of time and then back with people. And, it's just that continual.
Yeah.
So during that time frame, as a legislator,
So you were a legislator through some of this process.
just towards the end of it.
Okay.
Yeah. We were dealing with, like I said, there were times where he was great and then times he was back out. The oxy led to this, which ultimately led to heroin
Yeah.
because oxy became unavailable. Heroin all of a
And
sudden,
expensive compared to heroin.
and it just it was everywhere all of a sudden, and it was readily available. And so, as he would say, he swore to God he would never.
Yeah.
And then he was, right? And then it was a matter of survival to have the drug. So lots of treatments, lots of stuff, in and out of treatment. And finally got to the point where it did hit, and he's been clean now for 3+ years, doing
That's
great.
awesome.
And still working through it. Uses a medicated treatment program, which I'm a firm believer in, as far as helping through that process. But I told my story one night.
Yeah.
There was a bill on the floor, and it was contemplating whether we should increase funding for recovery housing.
Yeah.
And I think that was one component of it. And I got up, I just all of a sudden stood up. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Grabbed the microphone and shaking,
Yeah.
and I gave a speech, and I called it the devil at the door, which is interesting because that was one.
That was the first
Johnson,
show.
right?
Yeah.
And so
were you on that one too? I was okay.
But I didn't even know that.
I had
It
like
just
a little tiny
so
part.
interesting but I told this, I was saying that, you can't ignore what's out there right now. And this is probably 2017.
This is before it got really bad.
Really bad.
Yeah.
And so, told that story, somebody heard it. Next thing I know, Eric Johnson reaches out to me. Yeah. One of his guys from Coma came down, interviewed me, and that was it. That began the conversation.
Yeah.
And then Eric and I started a conversation once he told me what he was doing, and that's how I met you. And then did Seattle's Dying, and then Saving the Soul of Seattle's when Cameron and I were actually interviewed on that one. But I thought it was really important to share, and what's come about as a result of that is humanizing it. Mm-hmm. Parents and people of every ilk, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like I said before, it's
Addiction
non-discriminatory.
doesn't
Doesn't matter. And people would come up and say, oh my God, we went through the same thing. Oh my God, how did you get help? How did you crack the code on insurance? What I learned through that whole process was how broken our system is.
Yeah.
And where we need to put the emphasis, right? On-demand treatment, massive detox facilities.
Yeah.
We have to have so many different things because I never forget one of the times going through this thing and being given a number and talking about this, and it was like, yeah, well, we do have beds available 3 weeks from now.
Right.
And
I ran into that recently.
I remember,
4 to 6 weeks we'll have a detox bed.
I literally remember saying, I am withdrawing my son right now, and I don't know what to do. Nobody should do this. I'm not skilled. There's no YouTube video on what to do with somebody going through heroin withdrawal. I said, he needs it now. And they're like, we don't have a bed.
Right.
We'll continue. And I mean, because I knew somebody who did, I was able to get, but there were twice that I had to help him detox.
Yeah.
For 4 days.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Talking about PTSD. I mean, the memory is right now.
Yeah.
But that is broken.
Yeah.
I remember talking to somebody and trying to get through the insurance and saying he needs inpatient. They said, oh no, just here's a meeting schedule for him, and we recommend outpatient. I'm like, you want me to take him to a meeting? Yeah. This is somebody who's been
to a meeting and then to
living
outpatient.
on the street and is in active detail. Is maybe a few days, and you want him to go to a meeting? No, he needs to go to inpatient.
Yeah.
And not just for 25 days. He needs as much time as necessary. And then coming out of that, he needs to go into a facility where it's recovery housing. And so,
Right.
so that was really starting to crack the code of how this is. And I think we've made some improvements in the system. I think we've put resources and starting to put resources in there. That's part of why I voted for Blake, because we were able to get some of that money into recovery
I
housing.
can tell you it hasn't improved that much.
And the problem is, again, it's funny you say that, that the growth industry over 20 years. Well, we never really got there because we don't have enough people
Right.
in recovery services and mental health services. We don't have that. But we could have, again, going back to talking about using our criminal justice system,
Can
our
I ask you a question?
jails, etc.
Yes, no, and I agree with you. I'd like to ask you a question. This just sparked something for me. Do you think that this specifically may have something to do with the increased use of medical assisted treatment as opposed to any other thing? Because there's a lot of pushing of Suboxone and methadone everywhere, but still the availability of beds for medical detox and things like that are still very sparse. Unless you're willing to drive halfway across the state, but still you have to know somebody to know somebody. And I do,
Right.
but I was just helping a friend not even a week ago. And here specifically in this area and in Pierce County, it was a challenge.
Yeah.
Like it was.
So I think we have to be careful with the medical.
Oh, absolutely.
Because I do believe that some may see that as a panacea. Some may see it as like, okay, well, you're not doing heroin, but you're doing Suboxone or methadone.
Right.
And here, as long as you have that, if you don't have that wrapped around with services, and you don't go right, as you know, right there, you have to go through the entirety of the process,
Right.
and then make the choice if, in fact, that's the path you're going to do.
Yeah.
Because some detox, get clean, have their treatment, come out of that, have a very strong program, and remain that way,
Right.
and don't need any of that. And others.
We're not supporting the abstinence-based path at this point as part of my problem here in Washington State. There's just been a complete move away from that with a very, very intense push toward medical-assisted treatment. And one of the things that I've gotten the opportunity to experience through Evergreen Treatment Services in Seattle is that folks that are dosing on methadone, there's zero requirement for any kind of abstinence from street-level narcotics. There will be an episode coming out about that, that they're definitely paid by dose. I have friends that actually work in the industry. And so I find there to be this really huge challenge. And again, I think it goes to very simply, sort of the same kind of idea of putting them all in a hotel or putting them all in this low income housing, right? And then you shut the door so the problem is no longer seen on the streets.
The problem remains.
Oh, absolutely, it remains.
And if we're, and I've toured facilities in Aberdeen, and I have a tribal-based facility being built here, and I've talked to the program. If you don't have the complete aspect, if you're just allowing people to come in daily and get their stuff, that's
Right.
the only difference is they're doing it in a clean environment as opposed to going under the bridge or scoring their drugs wherever they scored them before.
Right.
It's perpetuating the problem and the lifestyle and everything else. Because its intent is to help you wean away from it. Its intent is to get you rewired
Right.
in the mind and everything else because of what the drug does. But it has to work completely within the entirety of the system.
Yeah.
It's, that's why I said, going back to meeting people where they're at. If we start to enforce the laws
Yeah.
and we start to hold people accountable and everything, we meet them where they're at, and then what path do they need?
Right.
And then we, as a government, as a state, as a legislator, we need to make sure that this is robust.
Yeah.
We need to make sure that we have enough detox beds so that when you do meet that person underneath the bridge and they say,
That you have the
I
resources.
want
ready.
I want help today.
Yeah.
Come on, buddy. We're going to go right
Yeah,
now.
we gotcha.
And not, I'll be back in 3 weeks. Or
Right.
a month.
And then they're not
dead.
there or they're dead
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever.
So by doing that, and I think we're kind of on a pathway to create that, but we're not, because again, it gets back to what we talked about at the beginning of this interview, and that's the ideologies tripping into all these different things and the defund and decriminal. And Lord knows we can't talk about jail or utilizing the criminal justice or prosecuting. We have to. It's all integrated.
Well, I think that all of our environments should look the same.
Yeah.
We utilize felonies to incentivize help. And, you can have a choice depending on the severity of your crime or whatever the case may be, right? But even if you're going into sort of the social service, homeless, industrial complex area as opposed to the carceral system, I think that it makes sense for all of them to look the same. And so with the intention behind to help an individual to redevelop themselves so that they are capable of caring for themselves. I think that's going to be the focus.
Absolutely. But I also think that, when you look at all those different things and you look at them combined, right, in a facility or however it might be, the end result, we have the ability to remediate. We have the ability to expunge. We have the ability in statute to say, look, what you did is a felony. And as a normal
But
course,
you can work your way out of it.
But here's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Because you have these other opportunities, when you get to this point, you have your full rights instead. You can have a firearm. You can vote. You can do everything normal. And why don't we do that?
Yeah.
We can do that for so much.
We have it here in Washington State. We actually have those opportunities. I'm in the process right now to have my gun rights restored. And as the whole world knows, I have 17 felony convictions, and we could potentially become a model in this state for something that works, right? And to have supportive people with lived experience who have overcome, to have a system that really does accommodate, the individual improving their quality of life as opposed to improving the state and nature of the nonprofit.
Right.
But, that's a whole other conversation that we could get stuck with. But, I'm one of the things that I love is when I get the opportunity to sit with another person who I would have perceived as way beyond my level, and have us be very synonymous as to what the solutions are to help folks redevelop their stability in life, right? And in our society. And I don't think we're doing that right now, but it does sound, based on, you, a person that is up here in the upper echelon of decision makers for our state, that there is some awareness, and that's good to hear. I've had this sort of idea that it's going to get worse before it gets better. And so, it's always nice to feel like, okay, I'm not off base with what I'm experiencing. But with that being said, I want to thank you for your time in such short notice and meeting with me.
Yeah, no worries.
But if you would leave a message with our Washingtonians and those across the nation of, what can we do? Yeah. Like, what can we do? How can we help?
You're absolute living proof sitting here today that there is hope, right? Yeah. And there's a pathway, and there are those that do recover, and there are, even if it does get worse, it can get better. We've lived in country. We've been through world wars. We've been through all this stuff. We just went through COVID. We've been through all these different things. We have to learn from it. Yeah. I would say to people, you've got to get involved. Yeah. There's much more to do. I'm not in a lofty position. I'm just like you. Yeah. Okay. I'm a person. I'm a business owner. I just happen to serve in this position. Yeah. I'm very attainable and accessible. So are my colleagues. Yeah. And use that. Don't look at people in elected positions as up on a pedestal. They're here to serve. Yeah. Elected people are here to serve. Use that. Be in their ear. Talk to them. Talk to me. Talk to your representative or council member or whatever. Yeah. Because those are decisions that are being made and they're going to impact you, right? So get involved. Get more people to get involved. Get more people to want to serve because it's needed. And keep bringing forth ideas to solve this common problem and to focus on restoring community, restoring what we want to do. In the end, that's what we want. We want to live in peace. We want to enjoy the day. We want to go to work. We want to go to the store and go to the coffee shop or whatever. We can have that if we find a way to work together, communicate, and just keep doing what we're doing. You keep doing what you're doing, right? Yeah. So happy to take the time with you today.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. It's good to see you.